We certainly learned a lot in the last episode of RWBY. Episode 6 of Volume 9 told us exactly how the Ever After functions, and how the cat and the tree are active participants in the ascension that the beings of that world go through. We have yet to see it in person, but one of the most important things that we learned in that episode is that most of the knowledge that Team RWBY and Jean had upon entering the Ever After, the knowledge that they gained from Alyx's story, is likely mostly false. Or at least, there is a lot of things left out of it, making that entire story an unreliable piece of information. Most notably, that Alyx did not come to this world and take this journey alone. She had her brother, Lewis. And now there are a lot of questions about Alyx and Lewis and what exactly happened to them in the Ever After, because neither the cat nor Jean were actually there at the tree to see what happened. Was Alyx actually the one to escape, or was it Lewis? Because Lewis, his name being derived from Lewis Carroll, the actual author of the Alice in Wonderland stories in our world, well, if Lewis is inspired by an author, maybe he was the author of The Girl Who Fell Through the World in the first place. Maybe Lewis happened to be a previous incarnation of Ozpin. Maybe not one that actually traveled to this other world, but maybe Ozpin reincarnated within him after he got back to Remnant. Did one of them get turned into the Jabberwocker, or even the Jackalope that is now Jean's partner? And what information that we learned in last episode can we actually trust? Because Jean has a certain telling of events, that Alyx was actually the cruel and evil one, and that Lewis was the kind and cunning one. But it's entirely possible that his memory of events could have been altered at some point in time, given that, again, we don't actually know what happens when a person from Remnant goes to the tree, whether they are given free passage back to their own world, or they have to sacrifice something in return. As Jean mentioned at the end of the last episode, he thinks that Alyx sacrificed her brother in order to get back. But maybe they each had to sacrifice part of themselves. Maybe both of them got back. Maybe it was Lewis instead of Alyx. There is a lot of information that we don't yet know and will need to be revealed later on, but I want to explore these questions in this video, and I'd love to hear your responses down in the comments below, because I'm sure each of us have different ideas on what happened and how things played out, and maybe at least some of us will be right. Starting off at who actually escaped the world, though. Whether it was Alyx or Lewis, neither or both. It could be all of the above, really. Because Alyx and Lewis, upon getting to the tree, they may have had to make some sacrifices. Maybe a person from Remnant doesn't get their entire memories wiped. Maybe a version of them returns to Remnant and a version of them stays behind. That upon going to the tree, they both return to their world and become a permanent resident of the Ever After. And the form that they might take in the Ever After would be something different than their normal human form, such as the Jabberwocker or the Jackalope. And the version of them that returned to Remnant might have some of their memories altered of the actual events that took place. For example, if Alyx was the one who made it back, maybe she no longer remembers her brother if she did end up having to sacrifice him at the tree. Or perhaps it was Lewis that made it back and wrote the story in memory of his sister that ended up possibly sacrificing herself in the end. Maybe it was Lewis that was faking his kindness the entire time, and he was actually the cruel and evil one. Or, in my opinion, what is the likeliest scenario, as I've been theorizing this for a long time, that upon getting to the tree, you are given some kind of trial, confronted with your inner self, your inner emotions, and your past traumas. Similar to what the herbalist did for all of Team RWBY, and what supposedly caused that personality change in Alyx, how she started distrusting everyone around her. Something happened at the herbalist, and I think that that would come to fruition, or that you need to come up with an answer by the time you get to the tree. Alyx didn't have that answer, but Lewis did, and so Alyx ended up staying behind, and Lewis was the one that made it back. We do see in the images of Lewis that we get in the episode that he is carrying around a book with him. So out of the two of them, we know the items that they have. Lewis has a book, Alyx has a dagger. And Alyx's dagger was also left behind in the blacksmith's shop. RWBY saw it as Penny's blade, so that carries its own connections with it, but if that is in fact Alyx's blade that was left behind, and the blacksmith is an agent of the Ever After that reforges individuals to give them new purpose, new meaning, and new existence in the Ever After, then it seems likely that the burden that Alyx left behind would be her dagger. So it does seem likely that Alyx was the one who actually stayed behind, and it was Lewis that made it back to Remnant. was writing down his adventures in the book that he carried with him and published the story in memory of his sister. Possibly with his memories altered, that he doesn't remember that his sister was cruel and evil, or it's even possible that there was some body swapping that happened at the tree, that Alyx and Lewis had their souls merged and then split as well, that part of both of their souls stayed behind in one being in the ever after, and, you know, Lewis kind of transformed into Alyx almost and made it back to the other world, and therefore it was both Alyx and Lewis that ended up writing the story of the girl who fell through the world. I'd like to think, though, that the soul merging would only happen with Ozpin and his incarnations, that it wouldn't necessarily happen here, and in my opinion, I think it's most likely that Lewis was the one who made it back to Remnant and wrote the story in memory of his sister, altered the events to leave out the parts where she ended up not being herself, left out the part with the herbalist, and left out the real conclusion of how they got out of the world, what happened at the tree, and how Alyx had to stay behind, how she couldn't face that trial and ended up being remade by the Ever After. There's a chance that, being from Remnant, the tree won't remake you, but there's also a good chance that it will. In our current situation, that'd be Blake, Yang, and Weiss are probably going to be fine by going to the tree, but RWBY and Jean, maybe not, and also probably Neo. But we'll see when they actually get there by the end of the volume, or unless Jean's other plan works out. Now, continuing from the idea that Lewis made it out and Alyx stayed behind, could Alyx have been transformed in her new form that she took on upon being remade by the Ever After? Could that be the Jabberwocker or the Jackalope? Now, the Jabberwocker could make a lot of sense, but there's also some things to conflict with that. Jean said that there should only be one Jabberwocker, that in theory, it would be the same Jabberwocker that Alyx faced throughout the story of the girl who fell through the world. It was mentioned earlier on in the volume, as Team RWBY was recounting the story and the events of the girl who fell through the world, that Alyx fought a Jabberwocker. So if it was that same Jabberwocker that existed during Alyx's adventures in the Ever After, that it is existing now, then there's no chance that Alyx was actually transformed into the Jabberwocker. That doesn't mean her memories couldn't have been implanted into it, or that the Jabberwocker was actually defeated during Alyx's time, and Alyx was remade into the new Jabberwocker. If Alyx was indeed a cruel and self-centered person, then it might make sense that the world would remake her in place of the Jabberwocker that she killed, that there would always need to be some being that fills that purpose of destruction. And Alyx might fit that bill and get remade into it. And with the Jabberwocker wanting to fix things, as it was saying when it returned to that Acre of Darkness, that it wanted to fix, well, it could be fix herself, fix the relationship with her brother, fix a number of other things. But it's also possible that Alyx wanted to be kind, that she wanted to be a better person upon being remade, and it could be that she was transformed into the Jackalope that Jean is now partnered with. Something that obviously Jean wouldn't even know about. But the Jackalope was not present in Jean's retelling of the adventures he had with Alyx and Lewis. So the Jackalope came afterwards, and that timeline might fit for Alyx being remade by the world into this Jackalope, a being that seems to resemble kind of the God of Light. It seems like the Jackalope and the Jabberwocker kind of are on opposites of light and darkness. We've only seen one of each, and they both seem to have resemblance to the respective gods of light and darkness as well, with the different antlers and horns that they have, so there is parallels to be drawn there as well. Overall, with the facts that we do know, that Alyx and Lewis both made it to the tree, and the story of the girl who fell through the world made it to Remnant, we know at least one of them got out. In my opinion, that is most likely Lewis, and he wrote the story in memory of his sister. And Alyx was left behind, reforged by the world into something different, both by the fact that Alyx's dagger seems to be in possession of the blacksmith, and with Alyx's little pin that she has, I think it's likely that she might have either been split into both the Jabberwocker and the Jackalope, or was changed into one or the other. I'm not entirely sure, but there are connections to both. And now the final question that I want to address: is Lewis a previous incarnation of Ozpin? And it could quite possibly be that we saw this previous incarnation in the Lost Fable as we went through a couple of Ozpin's lives. There is one reincarnation that does kind of seem to look like Lewis. Same skin tone, similar hair color, eye color, and even the shirts that they are wearing are similar color as well, though that last one could easily just be coincidence. And even if it isn't this particular incarnation of Ozpin, it could be that Lewis became another incarnation of Ozpin. I don't think that Lewis, when he was in the Ever After, already had Ozpin in his head, that he had the magic, the experience, and the abilities that Ozma had from all of his previous incarnations. That would be a little bit too much, and that would have been more obvious, at least from Jean's perspective. I saw the idea thrown out there that if Lewis was a previous incarnation of Ozma, that's why he recognized Jean and allowed him to get into Beacon Academy with his fake transcripts, because if Lewis was an incarnation of Ozma, encountered the Rusted Knight, and recognized the Rusted Knight as Jean, and, well, welcomed him into the academy and started his training, etc., then there would be that connection there. But that implies that Ozpin knew a lot more than what he initially let on. And given that by the end of Volume 8, Oscar and Ozpin were starting to become more and more merged, that Oscar was having access to more of Ozpin's memories, even though their souls hadn't fully merged by that point, if Ozpin actually had any memories of the Ever After, Oscar would have very likely been able to get some hint of that from the way that Ozpin was acting inside his own head. Unless, of course, those are the memories that he's keeping most secure in his mind if they're related to, like, the Relic of Choice or something like that, but that's a completely different discussion. In the case of Lewis, though, if he ever was an incarnation of Ozma, I think it's most likely that he would have become one after returning to Remnant, as based on what Oscar said about the words written in The Girl Who Fell Through the World, that she brushed off her bumps and bruises, but it was nothing compared to the loneliness that she felt in her heart. That loneliness seems to me that it kind of parallels what the God of Light said to Ozma and the way that Ozma reincarnates, that he reincarnates in the soul of a like-minded person to ensure that Ozma will never be alone. And if Lewis did return and was experiencing that loneliness, then, well, having Ozma in his head might be a potential solution to that loneliness, though having a voice in your head that you can't get away from, don't know how exactly that would resolve that issue. It might create other issues in and of itself, but the parallels could be there that Lewis ended up being an incarnation of Ozma. And if that was the case, it would be great if it was this particular incarnation that we saw on screen during the Lost Fable. Even when we see Ozpin traveling throughout the couple lifetimes that we saw, as he gets to this lifetime, he seems to be traveling between light and darkness. That could be relating to, you know, the gods of light and darkness that were fully explored within that episode of the Lost Fable, or it could even be foreshadowing the parallels of light and darkness that we're experiencing in Volume 9. But that could also be me just reading into it a little bit too much. But ultimately, with this idea, I don't think that Ozpin reincarnated into an individual that had been in the Ever After. I don't think that Ozpin has first-hand knowledge of this other world. Otherwise, he probably would have said something to Team RWBY, knowing that they were creating this pocket space in the void using the Relic of Creation. If he did have knowledge about how Lewis and Alyx got to the Ever After, then maybe he might be able to draw some connections there and try to warn Team RWBY or Jean against it, or try to figure out some other idea or something of that nature. I don't think that Ozpin has really any interference with the Ever After, but we'll have to wait and see whether that could be proved wrong. One idea that I kind of do like, though, and this is my own, crackpot idea, but is that whoever did make it back from the Ever After, whether it's Alyx or Lewis, is actually the ancestor of Hazel Reynard. They have similar skin tone, hair color, eye color as well, and just the parallels of either Lewis or Alyx losing their sibling and Hazel losing Gretchen, that would create kind of a very painful family history, but it would create an interesting parallel between Lewis and Alyx and Hazel and Gretchen. But just something extra to think about. To summarize, though, I think the most likely scenario is that when Lewis and Alyx got to the tree, Lewis was able to go back to Remnant when Alyx was not able to. By the fact that her dagger remained in the blacksmith's shop, I think Alyx was remade into something else in the Ever After, whether that being the Jackalope or the Jabberwocker, or perhaps her mind was split into both, light and darkness conflicting inside of her. And Lewis, upon getting back to Remnant, wrote the fable the girl who fell through the world in memory of his sister, leaving out the painful moments, possibly because he didn't want to remember her sister that way and wanted to give her a happy ending, or perhaps his memory was rewritten in some way, shape, or form. That the tree in the Ever After did take some other cost from him as well, not only just the fact that he had to leave his sister behind. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below and what you think on all of these different ideas. I'm sure that there's plenty more that you guys can come up with, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. If you guys enjoyed this video, got you thinking a bit more about what's happening in Volume 9 and the implications of the information that we're learning, make sure to subscribe and join the Guild of the Eternal Flame, as there are plenty more videos on the way. If you like the series No Game, No Life, make sure to check out my second channel, The Daily Flugel. And if you guys want to see some games played live, make sure to check out my Twitch channel, linked in the description below. And I'll see you guys in the next video.